Ladies and gentlemen, I'm live right now. Hey everyone, again, I'm doing another live tonight. I'm live right now, as you can see. Check it out, youtube.com/@FKT. Come join me to check out the live on horsepower versus torque, what wins races, and why. Hey everyone, again, I'm doing another live tonight. I'm live right now, as you can see. Check it out. Hey everyone. What's up? What's up? Let me see. No, that's funny. Where is the copy of the link? Nope. Share, copy link, put it in there. I'm live right now. Come join. /@FK8. There we go. Let's get him in here. Just give a minute for everybody to join. What's up? What's up? Looks like we got so everybody's coming in tonight. Very interesting topic. Very interesting topic. I think this is going to be a good one. Let me just get everybody in here. And share it, and voila. You're welcome, Bernard, man. Glad everything seems to arrive correctly. Had a bit of delay trying to get it out the door to you, but appreciate the business, brother. Rose, I really do. Hope for your build to be everything that you want it to be, because that's the whole name of the game, right? Yeah, so that's a doozy, brother. I will tell you, on the 2500cc injectors, they are pricey. They, with the full race pump, man, that's a huge upgrade. I'll tell you, running 93 on that's a little difficult, though. I mean, you can do it, but it's just got to run a little bit richer all the time, because they're so big. Unless you're, well, even in a Motec, you still got to run them a little bit richer. So just give a couple minutes for everyone to get in here. Wow, it sounds so quiet without that fan on. Need some background noise. You know what? I forgot about something. I wanted to show everybody this last time, but I thought this would definitely be neat. For those with the V3 flex fuel kits, the original design versus what I have called the future-proof design. So for those of you who happen to get in here quick, so right now the bigger throttle body, I'm going to be straightforward with you, man. Until you really get into some really big horsepower, it's kind of not really needed. Like, you really got to get up there, man, to have any real benefit. So here was the original V3 flex fuel kit adapter for the V3 kit. And this gets rid of all the extra jargon that comes with the V3 kit, which is like the crazy, you got two sets of 90-degree fittings and all the extra junk in the middle. This is what I call, although this is slightly more expensive, this is what I call the future-proof design. Now, yes, it has a few more pieces to it, and that's fine. But the advantage is when you're done, right, and you want to just say, okay, now I want to put a tank feed line on, it's literally now that simple. So this solves the future headache of possibly needing to change over when it comes down to that. We're throwing cams in an SI with a big turbo. Thanks. You know, that's a good question. And it really, I don't know what size turbo's in there. Yes, it absolutely can help. Especially when you get into a bigger turbo. The thing that we run into though is turbo size selection and relevance to cams. So when you're talking about that kind of scenario with cams, if say you have a 27.1 W2, 1,000%, yes. A W1, I'm not sure. I can't tell you on that. Yeah. So in that case, yeah, you definitely talking possibly. However, you need injectors. Just stayed stuck on loading. Sorry, brother, man. It's sometimes that happens. But it's nice that people are jumping in nice and quick today. It's cool to see everybody joining back in. Looks like people have been missing the lives. So, like I said, I really gonna try to do better about getting here. At least every Thursday, the minimal. It's just been a little tough to be undermotivated, and I know it's not an excuse, but I do have some health challenges. So they've been kind of getting in the way of things. So I'm just really just kind of trucking forward right now and doing. I found some better scenarios that really kind of help me get along with some of the things. And this mouse pad is so weird. That was the problem I was having the other day. This mouse pad is really strange. I've got a new laptop. I had to because my old laptop took a dump. Um, and this mouse pad is really weird and funky. And everybody's got a newer Windows Surface laptop, but this mouse pad has a very weird, like the texture and the push button is very strange and just very odd. Can you explain why some forced injected cars, forced induction cars, to make more torque than horsepower and sometimes horsepower than torque? Is it ideal to have both numbers equal? So that's a really, really good question, actually. And it's kind of pertains to the topic we're talking about tonight. So, having more torque than horsepower, that's going to come into play. So, basically, there's two reasons that a car will make more torque than horsepower as far as being turbocharged: turbo size and or camshaft, and last would be maybe cylinder head. Okay, those are the three things that play into role. So if you have a really small cylinder head, you're going to definitely end up with a small cylinder head and a small camshaft with power a lot earlier. And that simply happens because on a small camshaft, the airspeed in the cylinder is very fast at low RPM. Now, if you take the same camshaft, right? Say you had a car that made equal torque and equal horsepower, and you took that same cylinder head, same camshaft, and same turbo, and put it on a bigger displacement engine, it will now make more torque than horsepower. It's just that's the other problem with that calculation. So it's got a lot of displacement, cylinder head flow, camshaft sizing, and all that matched with the turbo makes the difference. So let's get into a little bit of the myths, right? I mean, guys at a track will say torque wins races, right? On a circuit course. Because there's more to this myth, or myth should say topic. There's a lot to it, actually. They'll say, oh, torque wins races, right? And then if that was totally true, right, then why, when I tuned Matthew's car initially on the RV6 turbo initially for his circuit car, and it was due to cylinder head and camshaft sizing not being appropriate. It made a lot less torque. It even made less torque than it did on stock motor, and that had partially to do with the cylinder head sizing, which I did not do the cylinder head, and the camshaft sizing, but it made a little bit more horsepower. He was significantly faster. Well, why? Well, his car's already moving. So that part plays into the equation, right? So torque, what is torque really good for? And how can you tell kind of the difference? Well, torque, if you're from a standstill, right? Vehicle's not moving, right? And you want an object that's standing still and you want to get it moving, you need weight. Torque is like weight. What do you want, baby? I got my puppy here again. He's trying to climb up in my lap. So that torque will get that initial movement started, right? So the issue is if you're carrying momentum in a course, right, and you're going from corner to corner to corner, do you really need a lot of torque? No, you don't need a lot of torque. So that's not going to win the race. Now, if you were on a course that's maybe really short and tight, like an autocross, now we could be talking torque possibly winning that race, because you have a constant reduction in momentum down to a crazy slow point with torque. Like, so torque's going to have its advantage there. So there's another reason, though, besides that, that he actually was faster. And it wasn't just that it was made more horsepower. It was torque management, because the biggest problem with torque is keeping tires on the road. So take a perfect example. Look at an F1 car. Yes, I know they're stupid light, right? But they make like no torque. And I mean like no torque. And if you take an F1 car and look at the amount of horsepower they make and then the amount of downforce they make, and you realize the thing weighs like 4 times what it normally would, equal to like the downforce adds to, like, I don't know, it's thousands of extra pounds. Look at how fast they go on like 650 to 750 horsepower. It's crazy. So, and that's just a prime example. So for drag racing, right? Even if the problem is there's where we find a little bit of a mix. We need some form of torque or a way to create torque to get off the line. We can do this either by some way adding more torque, a lot of nitrous, or we can also use gearing to get off the line. What does gearing actually do? It's a torque multiplier. If you take your gear ratio, I don't have all the math, but if you take your gear ratios and calculate it, your first gear puts down more torque to the ground because you have that multiplier. That's why in the same amount of horsepower and torque, you'll spin the ever-living crap out of first gear or second gear or even possibly third gear. And then finally you get into fourth gear and we don't have a torque multiplier. It's also why if you turn around and dyno in a lower gear, say on a hub dyno, you're going to artificially raise the torque number, which artificially creates a higher number. That's really not the right way to do things. That's not an accurate measurement. Now, when we turn around and think about horsepower and torque, I think the best way, I like to draw graphs because it's what works for me. What did you find? Did you find a B? Let me find that. Oh, where's the marker? In a race, and we have two cars with equal horsepower, but not equal torque. But one car makes horsepower later. So in the first scenario, we have, that would be your first, let's say just for giggle, 600. And then we have, let me see, and we'll say it made 480 torque. That's a terrible drawing. I don't know if you guys can even see this. How would I do that? That's right. Yeah, they're like crossing over. So here we have two very different graphs, and please excuse the extra writing. I don't want to forget about some of the stuff I have to do. The extended RPM graph. This is kind of like an Indy car. So once you're moving, horsepower is going to keep you getting moving and moving and moving. When you have a higher RPM but lower torque, but the same horsepower in a higher speed, this wins every single time, unless your power band looks like this, and you've just got a ski slope for a power band. In a higher speed scenario, the car with more torque will get the jump. So it will literally, initially what you would see in that scenario where you have both cars have good power bands when they're reaching their peak power, you will see the car making the power earlier will get the initial jump by a little bit, and you will literally see, even though they could be two identical cars, the car that makes the power later in the RPM band as the race goes on, especially in a traction limited scenario. That's where it's really going to win. And that traction limited scenario, say third gear, where you're making the same horsepower but less torque, that will stick to the ground better than the car that makes the power earlier every single time. It works that way every single time. So in the case that the best advantage you can do is extend the RPM as much as possible, and you will be faster. How much faster? Well, I've seen as much as half a second on two of the same cars that made the same amount of peak horsepower on the dyno. Half a second in a 60 to 130. That's a lot. So as for Songwick, your question about 470 torque, too much for a completely stock motor and transmission, 1000% too much. That's too much. That's way too much. But I need to put that in reference. When we say 470 torque, I'd like you to go look at my Instagram and see that last post I just did on the dyno between FL5 stock, FL5 with a P700, and FL5 with a 25660 on 93 octane. If you try to put 470 torque on that dyno, okay, because that dyno only reached 270 horsepower, around 270 horsepower on a stock one of those. If you try to put 470 torque through it, you're going to blow it up. 100% you're going to blow it up. Now, if you put on a higher reading hub dyno, probably not. You'll be fine. It's kind of relevant. So usually hub dynos read anywhere between 5 and 10% higher. So generally, mainline dynos are a little bit different. So so in this case, horsepower is king in the higher speeds, right? So in a nutshell, that's basically the win-lose scenario. So what are you doing with your car? The other thing you need to take into consideration, though, is if gearing will kill this every single time. My car's gearing would do better with lower power earlier for my terrible gearing for a 60 to 130. But to 160 miles an hour, that lower torque benefits me. That's why you won't see me put out 500 foot-pounds of torque at 5,500 RPM. It's totally useless. It's completely useless. So Bernard mentioned NHRA and NASCAR the same way. Like NHRA, if we're talking top fuel, that's kind of a really unique, weird scenario. If we're talking NASCAR, just look at NASCAR. Them guys, they don't limit torque ever. And when they limit them, they limit horsepower. They don't ever limit torque. Just like SCCA does not limit torque, it limits horsepower. So just look at it like that. Now, I'm trying to think of the other ways, because I had another couple ideas of how to look at this too. Of 0 to 60, there's a perfect example. What's going to win in a 0 to 60? Torque. Every single time. Yeah, well, that was an average horsepower thing when Dylan's car ran the S2000. That was an average horsepower thing. Both cars rev high, but the S2000, I don't know what kind of torque it made. I just know that the power band wasn't as good. It did not have as good of average horsepower. So that much I can tell you. I don't know. From what I understand now, he's made some adjustments to the car. And yeah. Loki, come on, Bubby. Not right now, okay? I know. Oh, so sweet. You just want love around the clock. What has been your experience in horsepower and torque, right? What did you hear? What are some of the things that you heard when it came down to horsepower and torque? I think it would be a good idea to go about with the one question was also supercharger turbo make more torque than horsepower. That was a displacement thing, but that can be changed. Oh, wait a minute. There's one other thing that'll do that too. Back pressure. What was the other thing I was going to talk about tonight? Shoot, I completely forgot. I had one of those moments, man. I'm so overtired tonight. All right. Loki. Oh. All right, do. Stop. Oh, actually, I should say one thing too when it comes down to that power band. How is that port injection coming along? Okay, so the port injection's good. Loki, I love you. Please go lay down. Go. The port injection's good. Now, the thing I haven't tested yet, and this is usually true, that direct injection makes more power than port injection. How much? I can't answer you on that one. I don't have any direct data, but it can also be in certain scenarios. If the cylinder head isn't done a certain way, you can actually end up making less power on direct injection. You will actually eat more fuel and make less horsepower. And it doesn't matter what you try to do. It becomes an airspeed problem. That also can contribute to a dynograph looking like a ski slope. I should mention the reason this wins, and when you extend the RPM, the reason this wins, and I completely forgot to mention this, the reason that this wins, when you drop back down, you're going to shift, and you're going to be here, okay, in this scenario. And let's say this is 8K. And let's say this is 7,400. And I did the math on this once before. And so we're going to, at the very least, be 600 RPM. Let's say 5,500, which is a pretty realistic spot to shift back down to from 8,000. And if we have it's not quite, it's actually a little bit less than 600 RPM difference just because gearing works very weird. But we'll say it's 500 RPM. That means that right here, you're going to be all the way down here at the very minimum at 5,000 RPM. That means you're going to be all the way down below this horsepower in this 480 area because the torque at that point is higher. So that means that it comes back to an average horsepower thing. Even if this car made way less torque, your average horsepower is going to be better in a high RPM scenario. That's why Indy cars are so darn fast between that and the gears. Is flex? I don't mind off-topic stuff, man. I'm all for it, guys, because if you guys got questions, it helps keep the lives entertaining. So please, if you've got questions, have at it. Is flex fuel sensor necessary if you only have 93 available? No, sir, it is not. At that point, you're not really doing anything than measuring how much ethanol is in your local fuel station. What do you think about the internal gate precision that released? I'd be interested in a 6266 setup. So it's interesting, but here's the one downside, and this sucks, is the wastegate's on the wrong side. Well, what do I mean by that? Let me grab Loki. I love you. Boy, you are being an absolute mush tonight. If you look at the wastegate, right, we already don't have a lot of room to fit an inlet. And if we look at the wastegate on the Garrett Turbo, right, it goes against the cylinder head here, and the wastegate's here. Except the precision wastegate's over here. So now your actuator has to get all the way against the cylinder head. Where do you put an inlet? So yes, it can be done, but you absolutely 1,000% now you can't run an inlet unless you have an FL5. Upcoming new stuff for Prox 4. I'm not actually partnered with them. It would be cool, but I thought it would also be neat if I did interviews with some of my customers and tell their stories, because I have one customer that he only became a customer. I don't remember what he had purchased previously, but he had a question. It just happened to lead to a conversation. I had the time to talk that day, so I did. And in a nutshell, he was so damn ready to sell the car. And yet now, and he was ready to sell it, man. I'm telling you, he was ready to sell. He had it with the car. He had it with the platform. And right now he is, the car is here for a ported cylinder head cams and another upgrade, which will be released and I will explain sooner, but we're keeping it's nothing spectacular outside of what hasn't been done before. But the reason we're keeping a little hush hush, we want to show something a little special on a car that's going to do a really nice 60 to 130. I mean, really nice stock motor 60 to 130. So I'd like to definitely see some records done there. The reason I can't really do that as well, obviously, because I don't have a stock engine, 1, 2, and I don't have stock gears, stock transmission to run, because that is the optimal 60 to 130. Boy, fuel lines and spark plugs. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the business as always. So the Honda stuff, I did notice something. Speaking of the CAN Flex, if you noticed, if those who keep an eye on some of the software settings, which I do, I keep a very close eye on the software settings. The CAN Flex compensation for ethanol content is a much lower number. The day when I took a head off, there was hardly any buildup of the pistons. I think it's from the ethanol. It's very plausible that you said you had a daily 35% ethanol, had the head gasket failure the other day and took off the head. Were you running, if you don't mind me asking, were you full stock fuel system on 35% ethanol? Because that's a little bit higher content than I would run on normally on a stock fuel system. Emily, this doesn't mean that it's a tune issue. It's just a question. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Chris, I'm sorry, man. I forgot that's your screen name. Yeah, so I have those moments. Is there better to run an inlet even if you are in a mathless tune? From what I've seen on a dyno, yes. So although sometimes I could like boom and shoot the owner of the dyno. Sometimes there, I go to 1, 2 local dynos. I don't have a perfect validation of this, but I took the inlet off and it lost like 20 or 30 horsepower in the mid range. But again, we need to keep in mind that I'm making at that point it was like 700 something to the wheels. So triple cup is, huh? A little confused what that means. So at that point, yes, and I saw that it actually, yeah, it made a little more boost up top, but it made no more horsepower, not a drop less. So it may have been a heat thing in the higher RPM radiating from the engine bay, creating that scenario. But I really do think that as long as you have some way of getting a clean air path to the turbo, it's a better solution than just having it open. Now, eventually, you do get to a certain size where it just doesn't matter. But if you've seen, a perfect example is pro chargers. If they can turn around and do a velocity stack, right? They do a velocity stack on a pro charger. They like almost always pick up horsepower when they do a velocity stack on an open pro charger. So having some type of direction and control of the air going into your turbo can be helpful, as long as you don't have a restriction in size or some sort of backup. Oh, yeah, see what's going on. Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. That's kind of wild. I do think, though, you do have a ring that just said, no, thank you. I've had enough. Well, the gauge started leaking bad the other day, but there was a random hole in the, had to stick a bolt in instead of the gauge. So the hole behind the actual gauge is just a 1/8 NPT, but the gauges, unfortunately, the heat from the engine bay, because they are so hot, these cars just run so hot, especially when you're on the track or summer weather, it kills the gauges. That heat that just builds up in that gauge, it just melts the internal parts of the gauges. And we're talking, you got to remember that engine bay is seeing temperatures, you know, north of like 200, can be like 180, 200 degrees. You know, if you turn around and stick a gauge in the oven at 200 degrees for 3 days, it's going to call it quits at some point. Unfortunately, that just kind of happens. For the spoon front end. So you know what? It's expensive. So for cooling and stuff. So the one that's another thing like renting. So I have a customer, and it doesn't matter if the gauge quality. I had a customer or have a customer, and we used a radium fuel pressure gauge, which is supposed to be a really good gauge, right? And it nuked it because he has a lot of power for stock radiator, stock grill, stock hood. So 610 wheel horsepower G30 770 ported head cams and revs to 8 grand. And it's been hot as can be this summer. And that thing literally destroyed the gauge, and it started leaking fuel through the gauge in like 3 weeks. It said, I've had enough. So yeah, that'll do it, man. That'll kill a gauge. Running hard, 105-degree weather in Texas, 1,000%. Yeah. Hey, we can run for stock bottom end to 8,000 all day long. If you have a large enough turbo, what's up, Billy? And you have valve train, yeah, you can do stock bottom end 8,000. It's not a big deal. The oil pump in these cars are fantastic. The thing that you do run into is the oil pan itself. The ports in the oil pan itself are the restriction at high RPM. So I don't have it here. And I just honestly been so busy I forgot to list it. I have a ported oil pan. And I've been porting the oil pumps since before people even had ported oil pumps for sale. Uh, that doesn't net you as much as the oil pan does. The oil pan nets you the most amount due to the fact that the hole where the oil filter, the small hole where you thread it on, inside of that, there's actually two 90-degree turns inside the size of that tube, which is wildly tiny. It's extremely difficult to port, but when done right, it picks up oil pressure. You don't get a 10 psi drop off at like 7,200 to 8,000. It just hangs there solid. And my oil pressure stays solid within 5 psi to 8,800 RPM. So that should give you an idea of how good that little mod can be. And I don't have, I mean, yes, my oil pump's ported, but I'll be straightforward with you, it really doesn't do much porting the oil pump because I've done just the oil pump and then I had the same oil pump and then added the pan to it. And I saw a much larger improvement by the pan and that little hole inside the pan. So that was the bigger improvement for that. So, but yeah, that car was, yeah, that was, like I said, that was a lot of horsepower in this heat, and that just killed that gauge. Mm, yeah, let's heat management. That's another thing. Oh, that was another thing when it came down to torque. Okay, that is the highest torque spot in the engine is where it's most efficient. However, and there's a big however, uh, it is also the most dangerous spot in the engine because under that high torque area, it is also the most sensitive to ignition timing generally. It also will running higher torque. That was another thing I should mention. When we did a little less torque and more horsepower, even though the same car was running a sleeved engine, it did not run as hot because that RPM, while yeah, you're having more combustion events and it does create heat to make horsepower, having a little bit less mound of torque can actually help you control heat on the track. It actually can help you control heat. What are good traction mods to help keep 500 and 450 torque? That's a good question. So the first thing I'm going to say is, guys, let's just chill in the chat and just, be friendly. So let's just say next slide and let's keep on moving. So the torque, 450 torque, is very hard to hold, especially on a stock transmission. Even with a really good tire, at the very least, on a 450 torque, you need is it's okay, guys, man. Let's just move forward. It's cool. It happens. That's all that matters. We move forward. No worries. So the 450 torque and the traction is very difficult, especially in first and second gear. You can forget the idea of that sticking at all, unless you have straight out slicks. In third gear, um, you got kind of two options. You can, I don't know if you're lowered, but if you're lowered, the first thing that comes to mind, and usually the least expensive part to buy, is going to be springs. So I mean, everybody has preference also, obviously, in tires too, right? I prefer my R888s. If I air them down and put any decent amount of heat in them, I get way more traction than any other tire in that tread wear range. The only downside is they need some heat in them, just a little bit of heat, and they do need to be aired down. So in the case somebody mentions RE71s or NTO1s, NTO1s are better cold out of the box, but they don't compare to an R888 with any heat in it, right? So there's your suspension wise though. I have Swift springs. I don't have anything super spectacular, but they have the highest rear spring rate. What's up, Abe? Long time, man. So the Swift springs have the highest rear spring rate. That's if you're just looking for straight line traction, that's your starting point. It's going to be you need a good as high a spring rate as you can get in the rear of the car. The other thing is your suspension components. When you start making 450 torque, things start to move around. Not as much in the back end, but what's up, Sour Patch? Not as much in the back end of the car, but the control arms, those control arm bushings definitely start to move around. So they make, I think it's, oh, geez, not Power Rev. I can't remember the name, but there's a purple compliance bushing in the front. Then you have the RV6, and then you have a white line anti-lift. Any three of those are an option. That's an excellent option for traction control in the front. What is anti-lift? Or in some cases they call it extra squat, or in the reverse of some cases, some say anti-squat. Yeah, buddy, it's a lot of FK8 guys in here. It is. I promise you, a lot of these guys are FK8 guys. So the anti-lift kit, basically it changes the suspension geometry in the front so that, because depending on how the geometry is in the front, can change the leverage against the spring. Yeah, Angel, odd man out, but I tell you right now, Angel's SI can dust off some Type R's. That basically allows the car to, when they call it anti-lift. Basically what they're doing is actually creating extra squat in the car to corner so that it has more compressive load, but as it comes up it doesn't want to lift the car as quickly or as much. So what will happen with an anti-lift kit on the same springs, you actually get more traction because the car is not squatting and taking load off the front tires. My car was so bad that when I was behind somebody, I did a hit in third gear, and he said, "Bro, I thought you turned your high beams on." And I was just like, I was behind him on the highway, and he goes, hit in third gear. He thought I turned the high beams on. It was that bad. My car would literally go, yeah, and that was it. It was like, yeah. And I had a 315 tire. That is a very large tire, a 315 tire. I'm all the way down to a 275 from a 315 on the same size rim, and I have more traction now on a 275 tire on the same exact brand tire. That's going to be all to do with the FC3 is an SI, brother. FC3 is an SI. So that all has to do with leveraging the weight to the front tires. Yeah, he is, brother. Yeah, that car is nasty. That little SI made 398 wheel horsepower on a dyno jet. It's a nasty little car. So that's what your goal is, right? Keep the suspension from moving around, because the more those tires start doing this from the control arms flexing, and the more you take that weight and transfer the weight to the rear of the car, the worst time you're going to have with traction. Now, I might actually literally be, I don't know yet. I haven't gone out and done a hit in the high 600s yet. Now, because my gears are longer, I can put down more power. I can put down a mid to upper sixes in the top of third gear, horsepower wise. But I haven't done it yet since I put rear sphericals in. That'll be your next step, the trailing arm sphericals. Because the other thing that's going to happen is the sphericals are very large bushing. They're like this big, but they're very open in the rear, right? You only have this middle piece in the middle with two large bolts. It's very open. So what can happen is not just the springs compress, those bushings can actually smush those trailing arms, and you will actually get more compression in the rear of the car. So coilover round set is an excellent idea. The coilovers can be fine for street use. It really kind of depends on the coilover, though, too, right? What you can do, what's nice about a coilover that makes them ride how you want them to ride, is if they're adjustable, you can adjust the dampening down and you have a softer ride. Now, you can have a higher spring rate and a softer ride because if your dampers are set really high and really tight, the car is going to be very bouncy. It's going to bounce very tight, short bounces like this, right? By softening the damper, you get more of a floating effect. See, there's a perfect example. The one on his car. What a stock FK8 spring race. I don't know. I just know that the Swifts are a significant increase. So there is a master spring thread, master FK8. That's what they say. Call it a master spring thread. Spring thread forum page. Stock 4.7 kg front, 4.2 rear. The Swifts are 6.3 in the front, so that's up from 4.5 or 4.7 to 6.3 in the front, and the rear up from 4.2 all the way up to 7.4 kg. That's as high as you can go. Height is not always the answer either, right? Going really low adds more camber, so when you go really low, you're defeating the whole purpose. So coilovers, though, are the true absolute answer because you can bring the car up to a height you want that's good to fit whatever tire you need and still get whatever spring rate you want in the rear of the car. I've been toying with the idea of doing some S3 coilovers. Thankfully, I have a good relationship with somebody who knows the people in the company. I can get them at a really good price. And the S3 coilovers do use the actual Swift spring company in general. So not just a lowering spring, they use the Swift springs. And the standard setup on this 10 kg front, 12 kg rear, and that is a street/strip usage. So from what I understand from the person that I know that has driven the car and rides in the car, they says it rides really good. I can tell you my Swiss springs in the car that I have that are lowered when you're just cruising, you would never know the car was lowered till you hit a significant bump. All those little bumps, man, you just don't even feel it. It's like it's not even there. In some cases, it's actually smoother. Is the drop with Swiss springs. It's about 1 inch. So it's about 1 inch. That's exactly what's on my car, the Swift springs. And so what's up, Edmundo? So, yeah, so the measured torque under the curve. So that's an interesting way to describe it. Are you assuming under the power curve in average torque? Because I've literally taken cars and put less torque in them and they went faster in lap times. So that's kind of like it made 20 more horsepower, but 20 less torque and was faster. So it's really kind of relevant from digging from a dig. I was saying earlier, we were talking about earlier, from a dig, torque wins all day. We can't really change the metric by like 20 or 30%. I'm talking if you do that, changing the metric by that much, you might as well change the horsepower by that much. So if you're going to give a car 100 foot-pounds more torque, well, you better give the other car 100 more horsepower. And in that case, the car with 100 more horsepower is going to win every time. That's not really a fair metric. So, and it all depends. And a prime example, as I was saying earlier, just look at an Indy car. And if you say, oh, well, yeah, they're light, but again, look at the amount of downforce they make at 100 miles an hour. They weigh over 5,000 pounds by that point, if I'm correct. So, and look at how they accelerate from 100 to 180. So it's retarded in the amount of, so again, the torque from an initial stop and initial move, yes, 100%. I'll agree all day. So if you got, as I was saying earlier, a very short track, like an autocross track, torque's going to win that race because you need to constantly get to an almost stop and get moving. I was saying earlier, if we're doing a roll race, you got two cars and you can put all the torque down. The one that makes more torque initially will get out, but then the horsepower car is going to drive by. So it's kind of a relevance thing. Yeah. Yeah, well, actually, people sit there and they made fun of the FK8. Speaking of handling, and also this goes along with it with the whole traction and getting traction thing. They made fun of this car, saying it wouldn't be what it is. But the Road Atlanta enthusiast class time attack world record is held by an FK8, and them guys are stuck on a 220 tread wear tire, not by the car, the 350Z that is understood made 750 wheel horsepower, but by a 550 wheel horsepower FK8. And I don't think tire size is a limitation. I don't remember the class rules for global time attack for enthusiast class. So yeah, Lotuses are cool, man. They're cool. So again, power versus torque in that metric. If we're dealing with a really heavy car, then we could maybe say torque's going to win. Like, you sure as hell wouldn't want 300 foot-pounds of torque in a 6,000-pound diesel. So yeah, you're gonna, I guess if you put it in enough perspective, yeah, torque will win, right? But let's say both diesels were doing 100 miles an hour and you had one that made 300 more horsepower but 300 less torque, the one's going to win. So yeah, who's going to gap who afterwards? Yeah, Chris's car versus the S2K. That's an interesting setup right there. So we'll see. We will see. And they have to do multiple runs so that no one goes, oh, I missed the shift. Let's post the video where we missed the shift. Right? Let's make sure everybody at least hits the shift. Right? More spicy questions. What about big rear wing on a front wheel drive? Oh, yeah, man. So that is a stability thing. It's not just because if you have a big wing on a front wheel drive in a circuit course application, and even so, just taking the stock rear wing off, and I've done this and driven down the highway, I can literally feel the difference in the car. So the actual stability overall of the car to keep the car from becoming unsettled is a lot of the reason for the rear wing. It's not just about that. It's about an overall traction as well in the corner, because you need front tire and rear tire traction. It'd be almost like saying, well, I got a rear-wheel drive car. Let me only put a rear wing on it, but not a front splitter. So it's just a matter of balance about front versus rear wing on the car, and what the intended purpose is for the car. But even so, if you look at it this way too, even the drag racing Civics, now it's not the same type of rear wing, but they put that long extended rear wing on the drag racing front wheel drive cars that do like 180 plus miles an hour. They put that there also to get through a slipstream. So, and that's long, and it creates stability for the car and actually can, in some cases, actually reduce drag. So it really just kind of depends on the use case scenario. Oh boy. I don't know what you did there, Edmundo, but can't tell you what you did, but I would revert to whatever you did before and undo whatever you did. Go put the stock file back on it. I hope you didn't break something. What's up, Juan? Like 15 more minutes, then I gotta call it because I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I've got I got a turbo to put in an Audi tomorrow. So been taking on. You should guys should see. Look, I'm not just a Honda guy, man. I'm an everything guy. You reflashed and nothing works. I think you might have put it in limp mode. You might have to. You might have somehow. Um, you might have literally. You didn't break the ECU because it's got a recovery mode. You might have to try to reflash it again. You might have to put the car in recovery mode. Olins. So I don't have as much data on uh, coilover sets. Gosh, I'm trying to remember the coilover set that Matthew has. FK8 coilovers. Mm-hmm. Gosh, there's so many of them. Olin sounds like really well. Usually there's S3, BC, RSRs. Shoot, man. Gosh, there's so many of them. My goodness. Um, Fortune Auto, I think he has. Fortune Auto coilovers. I believe that's what. Yeah, so I believe this is what he has. I believe he has Fortune Auto coilovers with. He's got a high spring rate. I think it's me personally. I think it's a little too high. Um, there you go. Yeah, Fortune Auto 510s. He's got it's like 14K front for 16K rear, which I think is a little bit much. I feel like the car I had to soften the front so much that it actually kind of bounces down the track to get the quickest time out of the car. I really think a 12 and 14, I think he can go down two sets, not down to 10, 12, but he can definitely go down to 12 and 14. I think it really be good down to like a 12, 14 kg and then put a little bit more damper back in the front. I think the car will be perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I'm helping put together if you don't look for a ride. He's like, holy shit, what is this? we need Yeah. A lot of people that have never felt E30 and they see the horsepower numbers and they think um they think that, oh well, I made 380 on 93 and oh, you're only making 30 more horsepower on E30, and then you get in that car and you realize that on E30 it will carry power flat to 7,000 and doesn't roll over at 6,000. It will just stop because, like, at 7,000 RPM on an ethanol based like E30, even stock fuel system, you're making 40 and almost 40, maybe 50 more horsepower at 7,000 RPM. And that's what's lost in that with air suspension and adjustable shocks. No, I actually don't know anyone that does air ride racing, but um, I know that it's kind of viable, but never as controllable uh, as an actual spring. There is, and I think it's McLaren though. I think they have. Oh God, I hope I'm right about this. It's like a hydraulic spring, and it's always adjust. No, what do they use? They don't have a sway bar in it. I know that, and they think they have something to do with the shocks or the struts where it actually adds like spring load or like a hydraulic to the outside. like 1,000 times a second or something. And one of the McLarens does not actually use a sway bar. I don't remember. I think it's the 670S. I could be wrong, but I haven't seen anybody with air ride really really get at it, right? Um, it's just, I don't know, the airbags would have to be so stiff to kind of control that, and they're not as linear as a spring. The spring's just you can definitely make a spring do something that you can't make an airbag do. So I know some people do it, but usually those guys that do it, yeah, it's okay for like local stuff, but I don't see them um do that. I don't see them like win like major sanctioned events. On ethanol blend versus 100 octane fuel, is tuning that much different for forget price and availability? So you're just saying all out 100 octane. Ethanol is king on a turbo car. Any alcohol fuel is king on a turbo car. You need the Q16, which is actually is oxygenated with methanol, slightly, but it's also highly freaking corrosive. But Q16 is great for like nitrous and turbo. And any sort of ethanol or methanol is just going to be king every time. It adds extra oxygen to it, but you'll find in 100 octane, like prime example, even if we did 110 octane, you are not going to get the amount of ignition timing that you're going to get out of ethanol. You're also going to have to run it richer to cool the cylinder more for the extra heat that you create by keeping the combustion in. Prime example, technically ethanol is technically 100 octane, right? But the effective octane is different. So 100 octane takes about, so your standard 93, really kind of pushing it to the edge, will take about 9 degrees of timing. It's just a stock head ballpark, okay? It's not every car, but we're going to use a ballpark, right? Not every car is exactly that, but close. The Audi's just the SUV, so it's nothing spectacular. The 100 octane is not like you'll get to 14 degrees of timing, 15 maybe, and you could turn around on 30% ethanol and you could double the ignition timing most of the time. You can usually, if you have a like catless downpipe and a good free flowing exhaust, you can usually get to about double that timing, 18 degrees. And you can even get to that timing. Here's the crazy part, starting with 91 octane. So this is how much ethanol is king on a turbo car. You can blend 50% ethanol and 91 octane, and then blend 50% ethanol and 95 octane, and you end up with the exact same amount of ignition timing in the car and the exact amount of horsepower. Ethanol, between the cooling effect, which is the biggest problem, and the octane, between the two of them, it's king all day. Now, for class specific like Matthew, yeah, we run a higher octane with methanol injection. That's because in his class, it's commercially available fuel minus ethanol. So what I think of meth and E50 combined, I could tell you that because I ran both. And for a perfect reference, on a 90-something degree day, on my car, if I do a pass with no methanol, and then but this was a lot of methanol, okay? So just keep this in mind. I had direct port methanol on every cylinder, plus a nozzle in the actual turbo. It added 20 horsepower. On a 600 horsepower car on a 90-degree day. If it was 70 degrees out, it would add like 10. Once you're on E50, the difference is negligible. The FK8 can run it. Why can't? So fueling solution required for higher ethanol content. Yeah, it is. It's direct injection in every direct injection car. Be glad you don't own a Corvette. Because who the fuck wants to pay $3,000 for injectors? Yeah, $3,000, guys. $3,000. for injectors, for upgrade injectors on a vet. I know. I've done a camshaft and injectors on a C7 Z06 Nightmare. So you can run fully 85 on an FK8. You need an XDI pump, 2000cc injectors, and high pressure line mod for me, and my in tank assembly upgrade. I made 546 on pump E. It was E75 was the content with room to go on Carlos's car on MHI stage 2, and it was port head and cams, and that thing revved to 7500 making that. What is better for longevity on seals? Pump or MS-109 or ethanol? Okay, so for seals, when we say seals, what do we mean by seals? Do we mean like the injector O-rings, or do we mean like combustion seals, or do we mean just like seals in the fuel system? So actually, I'll just tell all of it. Combustion seals will hold up better with ethanol because you're bringing the temperature down in the cylinder. So as far as the actual materials, okay, the ethanol, most of the seals that are in this car, the actual seals, aren't really affected by ethanol, the seals themselves. Like the O-rings to the fuel lines generally aren't. You may get some expanding of the seals, but you basically just need them, like you take them off and let it dry out for like an hour or 2 hours, and the seal comes back to its normal size. They don't really fall apart. The MS-109, I think it contains MTBE. So the MS-109, depending on the seals, the MTBE can be corrosive to the seals. Can be. Oh, yeah. Oh, they get pricey. So, yeah. High pressure fuel pump seals. So the high pressure fuel pump, the only seals you'd be talking about, because the high pressure fuel pump, I don't think there's an actual, gosh, I'm trying to think of how they seal the bottom of the piston. Because you've noticed you've never see a high pressure pump leak down the bottom, right? Notice you never see that. The machining tolerances on high pressure pumps are like 0.000002. Like it's retarded. The actual seals going in to the pumps, they really don't care much. Like there's not a huge ordeal. They have a seal that goes to the outside that attaches to the XDI. That can kind of get a little swelly, but and the O-ring to the fitting adapter, but generally it's a non-issue for ethanol or MTBE or Q16. Well, Q16, if you let it sit, yeah, it'll chew through it. But as far as the internal parts itself, right, with the solenoid and all that stuff, and actually, speaking of that pump, I told you I actually sent it out and get all new seals in it. I didn't, even when I checked it before I sent it out, I didn't see any issues or any degradation. So, his full race pump is easy to install as the XDI. The process is almost identical. The only thing you have to do is it's a separate top plate and bottom plate. The bottom plate gets installed first. The only extra step that you may or may not have to do, in order to get the pump in, the lobe can't be at top because the high pressure pump lobe can't be up, because then the pump, you actually got to push the pump in after you put the plate down. It gives you an alignment tool, right? You just push it in the center of the actual plate. You put the plate on, put the 2 Allen keys on to that plate. You torque those down. You pull the alignment piece out. It's a plastic insert. Then you take the pump, and the only thing you might have to do is rotate the crank a hair, because if it's up on the pump lobe, you won't be able to turn it. It fits just underneath the lip of the cam sensor. So that's the only thing that you would have to be different in the install. Other than that, the install is identical. There's no difference. And, they have a line on there. They have a PTFE line, an adapter, and dash 6 fitting if you choose to, which is nice. I definitely pushed for that. I said, I really would like to see that instead of the Gates hoses out there again. I'm really just not a huge fan of those Gates hoses. It's just my preference. Um, there was a whole big thing with PRL. Conservative OT or OTS maps versus custom. How conservative are OTS maps versus custom? I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of OTS maps, man, blow more shit up than not mine, but I've seen a lot of OTS maps, man, blow shit up than more than custom maps. And I'm going to tell you this because the problem with OTS maps is they will find a car and it'll be most of the time it's something, because I always take into account parts differential, where they'll turn around and they'll have one car that they built it off of that'll take 2 more degrees of timing than everything else. Every time I've done like an OTS style map, I know there's a safe constant limit, right? Because there are some cars when it's 75 degrees out on 93 octane on stock turbo, they'll take 11 degrees of timing, 12 degrees of timing. But they don't take into account for the actual heat of the day, or like a PRL intercooler gets way hotter, way quicker during the middle of a pull versus a Mishimoto. Because when I had my car originally way back on stock turbo on 93 octane, I could run 11, 12 degrees of timing on my local 93 Circle K gas, which turned out to be better than Shell or Sunoco. And then I could run, and I had a Mishimoto intercooler. I don't remember. I think it was an NVIDIA Catalyst downpipe, an R400 exhaust, and I could run 12 degrees of timing all day long, right? But if I take that same file and I shove that in every car, I go, oh, I have an OTS map. Let me give this to the world. Guess what? That 3 degrees of timing on a day where a car's pissed off and hot and might only take 5. There's only so much a knock retard can save. So that's one of those things. You maxed out your XDI pump on stock injectors? If you maxed out your XDI pump on stock injectors, something's not right. And I don't know who's tuning the car or how. I can't tell you what's going on. If I didn't tune the car, I can't tell you what's going on, man. You could have a bad low pressure pump. Could be the tune. Could be the way it was done. Dude, that's asking a question. I can't. It's a loaded question, man. There's too many variables. That's possible too. But you still shouldn't max it out on stock injectors if he's got stock injectors by any means. That's a good point. You may not have drilled the line. Any cams for high pressure pump and intake valves? What does intake valves have to do with the high pressure fuel pump? A little confused there. Are you talking about actual bigger lift? I'm not sure what your question is there, because I understand cams for high pressure fuel pump. Yeah, there's the Honda cam, but it's completely unneeded with the full race pump. The full race pump will do 800 wheel horsepower on 70% ethanol. That's no joke. 800 wheel horsepower, 70% ethanol. Put a set of 2,500 cc injectors. You're going to find out you're going to run out of injector first. Unless you start cranking the pressure up on the pump, then you might not. But you can only crank it up. I even actually had it up to like 160, 165, 160 bar. When you start getting a 170 bar on a 2,500 cc injector, it's not happy. So I don't see a reason to get a bigger lift pump. And let me put it this way. They tried testing the 4-race pump in a 5mm low lift cam. It was so big it didn't work. Couldn't control the pump. It was so big. Pump control was not possible. So really not needed. So there's going to be, I know that XDI had another pump, a larger pump for a long time, but I had discussion and had asked them about actually, hey, let me test one of those pumps. And I wanted to do it on Honda, and they said, oh, no, it don't work. Then I got Motec, and then I asked, and for the longest time, I just never got it. So, and I was willing to pay for one point, but fortunately, I got lucky, and I was uh, brought in to be the tester for Motec for the full race pump and come up with the settings for it. So I got lucky with that, and won't look back. It's awesome. So, Danny, the guy was. I think I know who. If it is who I think you know you're talking about, he didn't understand a lot of things for starters, and for second, um, he kept saying something. I really don't want to get into too much detail, but I put a file in the car, which he swore up and down that he had tried, and he said, "Oh, everything was perfect there," and I just renamed it, gave it to him, and he swore there was still problems. All the fuel trims are messed up. Everything smells like fuel now. Blah 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 blah. And the tank float is coming up with codes. What'd you do to this tune? And I can't even mess with the float. And I called him out and I said, "Look, man, I don't know what's going on with your car, but there's still something wrong because that is literally the file that you said worked perfectly." And he flipped out on me and basically tried to blackmail me. So I'm not going to get into all the details, but that's the short of it. And I'm not really going to get into it. There's plenty of things that he did, and it's whatever, man. I never blew up his engine. I don't know how I could blow up an engine 5 times within 5 months and blow it up 5 times. And if the final tune was so bad, why not take it off the car? So I don't know, man. He's just mad for whatever reason. I'm not sure. I just got a lot of threats for no reason, but whatever. I don't know, man. I don't get into it. Some people will. Honestly, man, I think a lot of people don't want to hear what I have to say sometimes. So they just don't want to hear it. Like I tell people the truth, right? I tell them the truth that a ported head is what it takes to crack, you know, 700 wheel horsepower on a G3900, right? A ported head is what it takes to crack 700 wheel horsepower on a 64, 66. That's what it takes, right? At the very least. Um, you know, I've said you don't need 750 wheel horsepower to run nines, and you don't. A sequential clutch, a sequential trans with a slipper, and 600 wheel horsepower is enough to run like 9.7 at 140. I've said that mile per hour is your dictator of horsepower, and it is. So, just some people just like to say that they don't like it, man. And one other company wants to slander my name just simply because, well, they were doing things they shouldn't have been doing. So I stopped working with them. And that's it, man. The haters, And here's the thing, and here is the biggest thing here. All right. And this is the takeaway from I'm always going to stand by this. I am the only guy that has my actual dyno pulls on video that's over 800 wheel horsepower with the car right there on video. And I'm also the only guy that does everything himself. All of it, from soup to nuts. Except for, and I totally take 1,000%, I don't fab like down pipes or intercoolers. I don't build transmissions, but I do everything else. And I can say without a doubt, because of that, I have the most experience in this platform. And I'm one of few Motec tuners in the entire United States that can tune this car properly on Motec. So I'm not down. It's just what people do, man. And I'm not really down. I'm just not trying to get into too much detail. So I just don't want to rehash a lot of the stuff. If the FK8 or FL5 came with a DCT, would tuning be a nightmare considering torque limitations and other challenges? would you charge more? Yes, because a transmission tune would now be independent. Because a DCT trans, I used to own a 2015 MK7 GTI, and I really didn't have it long enough to really become heavily proficient in DCT tuning, but that gets to be really picky, and you have to do recalibrations when you change the clutch of the actual DCT. And just like PID traction control, which I sell as an independent product from the tune, which you must have the original tune by me to run it because I can't unlock somebody else's tune and edit to it. That's an entire separate surface. Well, people say, do your tunes have boost by gear? Well, why should I do boost by gear when you might have a really sticky tire and your car will take that, and then I give somebody else the same boost by gear, it just blows the tires off and calls the tune garbage. So I don't do boost by gear unless we do PID, which is a traction control, and I add a boost by gear. So yeah, there's definitely challenges. And my Motec setup and Motec tuning are two separate things. So if a car's already set up on Motec and I tune it, it's just going to be the tuning fee starting. It starts at $750 and can go all the way up to $1250 depending on what's on there. There's a lot of stuff on there sometimes. But Motec setup fee, my setup fee is $500 to set the car up, meaning get it running and driving up and down the road. Because you can literally sit there, like I did with one of my customers' cars. I put the Motec on it, and I got it to idle, and I still had to sit there for 2 hours and change that many tables. I literally had to go through all sorts of things, everything from getting the car to idle right. Yeah, Danny, look, man, I think you're saying the slander part, they do it. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know, man. Maybe they feel threatened. I don't know, but it's unfortunately, Danny, it's kind of one of those things in the community, man, where unfortunately there's a good portion of the community that, one, I kind of come across different than other people, and I know this. I know I come across different, and I try to educate, but they don't take it that way, and they get offended. And then when they get, I don't know, angry at me, I'm like, okay, you know what? And I just won't tolerate certain things. And then they go and they slander my name, usually not of any fault. Like I had a guy, and I'll tell you this. This is a perfect example. And it's not that anything I'm upset about. He was removed from my chat by a moderator, and he said, "Hey, why did you remove me from the chat?" And I messaged him, said, "I don't know. I don't think I did. It may have been the moderator from my chat." And my moderator had explained he was in my tuning chat trying to tell to go to other tuners, and it was like it's supposed to be about technical information and the way I tune. And you had these guys in there, so they all got, the foot, because that's not what my private chat is on my Facebook group for. It's for technical information sharing, and that's what it's for. And I said to him, he said, "Well, just look, I was praising your tuning." And I said, "Well, I can't go back and look at that because all the messages have been erased." And he said, "Oh, well, he said something else. He said, 'Oh, well, you lost me as a customer.'" And to be honest with you guys, usually when they say that, they were never going to be a customer in the first place. And I looked up the name too, just to see. I was like, has he ever purchased anything in the years and years have been around? And not a thing. So basically, I don't know if it's like backlash, but he's tuned by somebody who hates me and hates my fuel system for some reason. So a lot of times I have clients, and here's the best part, and this is what I do love about this business. I have clients who are customers who then become friends. It's not usually the other way around, because usually you'll turn around, you meet somebody, they want to be friendly, and they don't spend any money with you. They usually never buy anything. They just want to hear information from you. And then when I turn around and say, hey, look, man, there's enough. I can't just keep handing stuff all day. I have to run a business. They get mad. And I think that's what it is. Those are the reasons that I think people get upset. They want me to give information for free. They don't feel like it's valued. They don't understand that I've spent, like the cylinder head porting. They don't understand how much money I've spent in the cylinder head porting. They don't understand, like, I can't go out and be like other guys and buy a brand new integratype S. Why can't I do it? Because I've spent all my money in R&D. I do that not just for me, but for the community as a whole, right? I could be and my prices, I don't charge you more because you make more money. I don't do that either. And I see that all the time. I see that all the time. And that actually really bothers me a lot. That bothers me a lot that I see that. And it's wrong. It's wrong on so many levels. You shouldn't get charged more because you make more. You should get charged what you should get charged based upon a set labor rate. Now, if you continue to turn around and buy through me, yeah, I'll try to help you out, right? I'll try to help you out. I will. You won't even ask for it, and I'll help you out. And many of my customers that have been long-term can attest to this. Many of my long-term customers can attest to this. So, but that's why I can't afford a brand new integratype S or a brand new FL5 on top of this car. The only way that would happen is if I sell this car. And I've still got a couple more things to do. I have one more goal. And I know I'm going to say this, and I hope to God it happens, because I sure as hell don't want to buy another turbo to get there. I do want to crack 900 wheel horsepower. I do want to do it. It's just a goal. And we'll see if it happens. And I want to do it on the dyno over here where a stock R reads 270. That's what I want to do. I want to do that. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, but I have screened my clients because the what's the next machine after the FK8? You know, I've thought about it, and I've thought about it a lot, and this is probably left field from what most people would say. I'm either going to do one of two things. I might actually buy an integratype S because, my God, they're beautiful. Although it's the same platform. Or for a long time, I've wanted a C6 Z06, the LS7 powered Z06 Corvette for a long time. Ever since I was a child, I loved Corvettes. I loved them. And they've had a special place. And the other crazy part is they weigh next to nothing. They weigh less than a Type R by like 80 pounds or something like that. It's wild. And I just think that's really a special car. And if I were to do that, it would be one color. And I'd really be a pain in the ass to find it, would be the atomic orange. Because that is the prettiest color they made that car in. Absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous. So, but I think that pretty much covers all the stuff, man. As far as the interview with the customers, and they want to know all sorts of things too, like what does it take to make 600 wheel horsepower? I hear that a lot, and I sell them as, hey, just kind of go through my videos, go through my content, right? Go through how it's been done through a lot of content, right? Go check out my my YouTube. And they get mad that I won't just give them a list of parts, because every time I've done that, guys, they just go buy parts somewhere else. They do. They just go buy parts somewhere else. They never end up spending $1. And so I tell people, if you want to really know, I can do a $50 refundable, right? Or sorry, not refundable, It is applied to purchases, a $50 build consultation. And they're like, oh, he's crazy. He's out of his mind. No one else charges for this information. But unfortunately, I do say that, right? But the thing is, though, it does prevent me from wasting an hour trying to tell somebody how to get the 600 horsepower when I've already done it time and time again in the YouTubes. So screening clientele, that's just kind of a business thing. I don't have another employee, right? I don't have a shop. I have this little building. It's just me. It's my doggy. And I don't have a lot of time. So, man, if I could have had somebody and I was in a higher traffic area, man, I'd have a big shop right now with multiple employees. But I'm not in a high enough traffic area to do so. So, but I think that's pretty much it, guys. I think I'm about to wrap this up. If you guys got any other quick questions before I call it a night, fire them off real quick. No, I don't talk to either. I don't talk to either of them. What was said to me directly by one is the reason I don't talk to one. And the other one, I've never talked to. And for some reason, he just loves to say things about me. I've literally seen emails about the things he says about my products and me. So I don't talk to either of them. FL5 water upgrade. How much without any other cooling mods? How much? I'm assuming you're saying how much does it help before without any other cooling mods? So here's the thing. It helps cool the car back down quickly. It doesn't raise your heat management ceiling. If you have if you're off throttle, it will bring the coolant back down quicker, the temperature back down in the block quicker, but it won't raise your cooling capacity, your total capacity. So when you're on throttle, if you're limited, you've already heat soaked your whole system, you're still just going to be heat soaked when you're on throttle. But you can get a faster recovery. Did you know? I think Bosch is going to step up their encryption for future ECUs. It was a pain in the ass for my Supra. I don't know, because it was a pain in the ass with the Type R too. A lot of people Honda had a difficult time unlocking the FK and the ECU because Bosch ECUs have a lot of limiters. They have a lot of complicated steps to limiters where so even the 17 and 18 Type R, think there's the primary air charge table and then 3 boost tables, 3 primary, and then the 19, 20, 21 have 2 additional boost tables via temperature, like full tables, and then it gets even crazier because for one, on the 2020 and 2021, the EGT mod, which didn't work, where a 2020 and 2021 would not hit full boost on a bigger no matter what you did, it wouldn't make full boost with targeting. So I would say for simple street cars, I would say just stick to Honda unless you're going to a Telford Stage 2 cam or a Tier 3 cam or 2500cc injector is a little bit more beneficial but not fully needed. Being now, although it's difficult, the other thing I'm going to say, if you're trying to do more than 32 pounds of boost consistently, like the Honda, when you get to a certain boost level, the wastegate and the controls start to do funny things, and you start getting throttle plate closures. So I ran into that. I should mention this, and then I'll cut this video. The FL5 tuning of wastegate control is way more sensitive. And I mean way more sensitive than the FK8. Way more sensitive. I had to make gigantic changes to get this car to stop partially closing the throttle plate by a lot. I mean, big changes to the wastegate chart. So, and this was just to get it to stop closing the throttle plate within 27 pounds on a G25 660 on a bone stock motor FK8 on 93 octane. Every time I get above 6,000, the throttle plate would be doing all sorts of crazy stuff because it would want to overshoot the command by 2 psi. Yeah, and the ECU was wigging out, totally wigging out. So if you're looking to try to do something like, oh, I'm going to run on a bigger turbo, like in 36 pounds or something, or you want to do something like a 35 1050, and you want something, or you want to run a precision turbo, yeah, go get Motec. So big cam and that stuff. So, all right, gentlemen. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Thank you for listening to everything in the live, and it's nice, man. No trolling today, which was nice. It was really cool. Everybody was just kind of chilling and being part of the group, and I appreciate it. So I want to say for future lives, please go to my Instagram and shoot me a message for what you think would be an interesting live. And hopefully I haven't already done it, or I can put a twist on it to really spruce it up, man. So again, look forward to it. I don't see why I can't do it next Thursday. It's a bit tiring, but I do love the comments, and it brings up a lot of thought process. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Where is... Oh, darn, the stupid mouse gets stuck. That's what keeps happening. Brand new computer, and the mouse gets stuck. There it is. End stream. Good night.